It's one of the biggest crises of our time, housing. Many young Canadians feel they will never be able to afford to buy a home, something their parents and grandparents took for granted. Calgary journalist Jessica Barrett explores the issue in No Place Like Home, the missing key to our housing crisis. And in some cities around the world, she found solutions. Joining me is Jessica Barrett. Great to have you here.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me.
Now, you moved from Vancouver to Calgary because of the expensive housing in Vancouver. Have you found your housing dreams in Calgary?
Yes and no. I have found that my housing dreams have changed after moving to Calgary. So it's a bit of a two-part story. So on the first leg of it, I moved here just seeking affordable housing, and I did find that. I found affordable rental housing in a place that I loved in Bankview, a neighborhood in central Calgary. And then for the very first time in my life, I got dem-evicted, which is kicked out of that house so they could tear it down and build something else there. And that was sort of, as a renter for the last several decades before that, was the last straw. Decided I was going to then enter the housing market. And I'm so lucky that I was able to do that. It was pre-pandemic, I will put that out there. So my partner and I bought a house where we currently live. And then it just so happened that that house is in a neighborhood facing a lot of development pressure. And then we found that even as someone who is safe in the housing market, even just the effect of our housing crisis in terms of development pressure really changed how we related to our neighbors, whether we saw a long-term future for ourselves in our neighborhood. And that's when the penny really dropped for me in terms of, our housing crisis isn't just a big city thing. It's a whole Canada thing. It's a whole world thing if you really dig into it. And also, there's a separation between housing and home. And sometimes the way that we're building housing actually impedes people's ability to feel at home.
Now, for the book, you went to a number of cities around the world, among them Vienna. So what are they doing right with housing there?
Well, you could make a very good argument that Vienna has the world's best housing system. So more than half the city, about 60% of the population, lives in some form of subsidized housing. So whether that's municipal housing, which is built and run by the city, which is also a state, which is important because they have state powers to build that.
Yeah.
And then another, about quarter of the city lives in what's called community-led housing. So things like cooperatives or limited profit housing, where people do put their own investment and their own money into it, but it's meant to stay affordable for generations. And because of that, Vienna's just a really relaxed, chill place. It was amazing to visit a place where people just don't really talk about housing. It's just not a thing people are discussing because it's not an issue, and they're free to think about anything else.
The thing is, here in Canada, people want to have equity in their home. They want to own their home, a home 100% and build up that asset. So in Vienna, you're talking about a mixed private-public partnership. Would it work here? Would people accept it?
I think it could work here, and in fact, it has worked. We've done this before with our cooperatives that were built in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, around then. And there is such a thing as equity co-ops in Canada. It's just that we don't hear about them, and there's no government support for them. So it does work. It works all over the world, but you need to have governments and you need to have programs and pathways that champion this for people. It also requires people to kind of change their thinking about home and home equity. We're all hoping that we're going to make some money off of our houses in the end. I've found that pursuit really kind of erodes the present when you're living in your house, and whether you decorate it the way you want, or whether you're holding back on that because of resale, or whether you're getting to know your neighbors or not because you think you're going to trade up. And where do we spend the equity that we make on our housing? A lot of the time it just goes to the next house because then the price has gone up even more, or we use that to help our children get in the market because they can't on their own.
Right.
The return isn't really what we think it all is.
You also write in the book about this enormous debate that Calgary had a couple years ago involving blanket rezoning.
Yeah.
It looks as though City Council is going to reverse that policy. Do you think that's the right decision?
Well, it's a complicated thing. I mean, I think on the whole, we do need to make it possible to build more different types of housing. And I think that's a good thing. I think the way that some cities, including Calgary, have gone about rezoning has really eroded trust in the city and in public officials. And I think that is very damaging. And one of the things that I don't think gets taken into consideration a lot is this idea of, home as an emotional thing. And so when you are threatening to change a neighborhood, perhaps quite drastically, it feels very threatening to people on like an existential basis. And if you don't account for that in the process, you're going to get these knee-jerk reactions and people are not going to buy into it.
And you touched on this earlier, the difference between housing and feeling at home. And you found some issues in Calgary with that, in that the city is so spread out that it's difficult to form a lot of those connections with people.
Yeah, and Calgary is certainly not alone in this. And I know that Calgary has a great sense of community in some places, and some people really love it here. I have found that in Calgary, and I know this happens in other cities, because it is so spread out and so sprawled, and because we tend to build more affordable housing on the edges of cities where the land is cheaper, when it's time for people to settle down and find a place to live and raise a family, they're going in all different directions. And that's what happened to my community here. We all lived sort of city center until it was time to buy homes and have children. Now I have so many friends that have kids the same age as mine, and they're each a 20 to 30 minute drive in a different direction. So do we ever see each other to support each other?
Yeah.
No.
One thing I found interesting in the book is that you think of the big cities like New York and London, and they're just crazy expensive for housing. But there are exceptions, like Tokyo, one of the biggest cities in the world. Everybody seems to be able to afford a home there.
Right? Yeah, I mean, this is a solvable problem, and there are examples out there of cities that have done this. Singapore is another example, and there's different ways to do it. Tokyo has really leaned into a lot of private development, and they've made very permissive zoning, so you can build a lot. And so there are some trade-offs there. I mean, it doesn't have as much green space as a lot of people in North America would like.
Right.
Homes are very small, and they don't have a lot of heritage. But you can also live affordably for under $1,000 a month in one of the biggest.
Under $1,000 a month.
Under $1,000 a month in one of the biggest and, by all accounts, coolest cities in the world.
Yeah. You have a 5-year-old son. So what is his housing hope for the future?
Well, we're basically making plans for our future housing that I'm, prepared for him to be at home until he's 25 or 30, if that's what it's going to be, which means that we are, when we're making changes to our housing planning for, the next 20 years of our lives, we're factoring that in.
Should that be normal, though? Shouldn't people start getting houses when they're 26, 28, like they used to?
I mean, it depends, right? I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ways we can think about housing in terms of multi-generational communities and neighborhoods and types of housing complexes that, let us live there in community in a variety of different ways. Does my child need his own house at 25? I'm not quite sure, but he's going to need his own space.
Yes.
And we're going to need to be able to account for that. I would like him to have his own space.
Yeah. All right. Well, best of luck. Very interesting book. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jessica Barrett's new book is No Place Like Home, The Missing Key to Our Housing Crisis.